He got his maid pregnant and threw her out. Now she's the billionaire's wife, and he's desperate to win her back. Hi, my beautiful, priceless, and forever loved family. It's your Mr. Peter. Before anything else, please let me offer you a prayer. Not just words, but something soft to hold on to when life feels heavy. I pray peace flows into your life like morning light, gentle, steady, and healing. I pray the battles you've been fighting silently begin to ease, and that love wraps around you in ways only heaven can arrange. I pray the loneliness fades, the doubts grow quiet, and your spirit remembers how worthy and needed you truly are. You are not forgotten. You are not alone. You are so deeply loved, more than I could ever say. Now please hear me, family. After you saw this title, I want you to know the truth. I didn't just write this video. I lived it. I felt it. I breathed every moment into it. This isn't just storytelling. It's my heart poured into something I hoped you'd feel. I worked so hard on this story because I believed when I returned, your love would meet me here. But the truth is, YouTube is pushing us down every day, and lately it feels like my voice is fading in the noise, but I still believe in you, in us. So from my heart I ask, promise me you'll like this video, drop a comment, just a few seconds of your time. But it keeps this family alive. It's not just my channel, it's ours. And only with your love can we rise again. And please, don't leave the story in the middle. Every second carries love. Every word is a gift from me to you. Stay with me till the very end. That's where the magic always lives. With more love than my voice can carry, always your Mr. Peter. The crystal chandelier had witnessed many secrets in the hollowed mansion, but none as devastating as the one about to shatter its silence on this storm-ravaged evening. Jenny Davis stood beneath its glittering light, her trembling fingers clutching the pregnancy test that would destroy her world. Thunder crashed outside the floor-to-ceiling windows as rain lashed against the glass like nature's own fury. For 2 years, she had been invisible in this house, cleaning, polishing, existing in the shadows of wealth she could never touch. Tonight, she would discover that invisibility had been her only protection. "Wayne," she whispered, her voice barely audible above the storm, "I need to tell you something." Wayne Hollard appeared from his study like a predator scenting weakness. At 32, he embodied everything money could buy and morality couldn't teach. Aristocratic features carved from marble, ice-blue eyes that had never known genuine warmth, and the casual cruelty that came with inherited power. His charcoal suit cost more than most people earned in months, worn with the arrogance of a man who had never faced consequences. "What is it?" His voice cut through the air with practiced dismissal. "I have Tokyo calling in 10 minutes. Make it quick." Jenny's heart thundered against her ribs. 3 months of secret meetings had felt like salvation. Stolen kisses when the staff went home, whispered promises in empty corridors, nights when he'd held her close and made her believe in fairy tales. Now, facing his cold impatience, those memories felt like elaborate lies she'd told herself. "I'm pregnant," she said, holding up the test with its unmistakable double lines. The silence stretched like a blade being drawn across glass. Wayne's expression shifted from irritation to shock, then morphed into something that made Jenny's blood freeze. Pure, undiluted revulsion. Pregnant. The word fell from his lips like poison. How convenient. Right when my engagement to Victoria Manning is being announced next week. The words hit Jenny like ice water. Engagement? Wayne, what are you talking about? Did you really think this was going somewhere? Wayne's voice carried the casual cruelty of someone swatting a fly. Victoria Manning, daughter of the Manning Hotel fortune. Our families have been planning this merger for months. The announcement goes public Monday. Jenny felt the world tilt beneath her feet. "But you told me you loved me." "I said what I needed to say to get what I wanted," Wayne replied with devastating matter-of-factness. You're an attractive distraction, Jenny. Nothing more. Did you honestly believe I'd destroy a $50 million business alliance for the help? The words hit Jenny like physical blows. A trap? Wayne, what are you talking about? Don't play innocent with me. He began pacing, his expensive shoes clicking against the marble. You're my maid, Jenny. Did you really think I wouldn't see through this pathetic scheme? Scheme? Jenny's voice cracked. Wayne, I love you. I thought you loved me too. Wayne stopped pacing and fixed her with a stare that could have frozen fire. Love. You actually believed that? Christ, you're even more naive than I thought. Each word was a dagger to Jenny's heart. She thought of the nights he'd held her close, whispering about how different she was, how special. The way he'd traced her face with gentle fingers and told her she was beautiful. Had it all been lies? You said I was different, she whispered, tears streaming down her cheeks. You said I mattered to you. I said what I needed to say to get what I wanted. Wayne's voice was matter-of-fact, as if he were discussing the weather. You're an attractive woman, Jenny. I'm a man. Simple as that. The casual cruelty of his words nearly brought Jenny to her knees. She placed a protective hand over her still flat stomach, the gesture not lost on Wayne. Oh, please, he sneered. The protective mother act. How touching. Tell me, Jenny, how much do you want? What? For the abortion, and for your silence. I assume that's what this is really about. Money. Jenny stared at him in horror. I would never. Wayne, this is your child. Our child. My child. Wayne's laugh was harsh, bitter. Even if that thing is mine, do you honestly think I'd claim it? Do you think I'd destroy my reputation, my family's name, for a bastard child with the help? The word bastard hit Jenny like a slap. She felt something break inside her chest, something that might have been her heart. You don't mean that, she whispered. But even as she said it, she knew he did. I mean every word. Wayne moved closer, his presence suddenly menacing. Let me make this crystal clear for you, Jenny. You are nothing to me. You clean my house, you warm my bed when I'm bored, and that's all you'll ever be. Did you really think I'd introduce you to my friends, take you to charity galas, marry you? Each question was delivered with surgical precision, designed to inflict maximum damage. Jenny felt herself shrinking with each word, the confident woman who had dared to love him crumbling into nothing. I thought, she began, but Wayne cut her off. You thought wrong. You're my maid, Jenny. That's all you've ever been, and it's all you'll ever be. The fact that you're carrying my child doesn't change that. It just makes you a problem that needs to be solved. A problem. Jenny's voice was barely a whisper. Yes, a problem. And I solve problems permanently. Wayne walked to his desk and pulled out a checkbook. Name your price. Abortion, silence, disappearance. I don't care how you handle it, but I want it handled. Jenny watched in numb disbelief as he began writing a check. This was the man she'd fallen in love with. This cold, calculating stranger who spoke of their unborn child like it was a business transaction. I won't take your money, she said, surprising herself with the steadiness of her voice. Wayne looked up, his pen paused mid-stroke. Excuse me? I said I won't take your money, and I won't have an abortion. His eyes flashed with anger. Then you're fired. I already figured that out. And blacklisted. I'll make sure you never work in this city again. Jenny felt a spark of her old strength returning. Do your worst, Wayne. I'll survive. Will you? Wayne stood towering over her. A pregnant, unemployed maid with no references, no family, no money. You'll be on the streets within a week. Maybe, but at least I'll have my dignity. Dignity, Wayne laughed cruelly. You think there's dignity in raising a bastard child in poverty, in struggling to feed it, in watching it grow up knowing its father wanted nothing to do with it. The words were designed to break her, and they nearly did. But Jenny straightened her shoulders, drawing on reserves of strength she didn't know she possessed. "There's more dignity in that than in being you," she said quietly. Wayne's face darkened. "Get out!" "What?" I said, "Get out. Pack your things and leave. Tonight." Jenny stared at him. This man who had been her lover just hours ago, now looking at her like she was something unpleasant he'd stepped in. "Tonight?" "Wayne, it's raining. It's late. I don't care if it's a hurricane. I want you out of my house now." The finality in his voice was unmistakable. Jenny realized that the man she'd loved had probably never existed at all. She'd been in love with a facade, a carefully constructed mask that had slipped to reveal the monster beneath. "Fine," she said, her voice steady despite the tears streaming down her face. "I'll go." "Good." "And Jenny." Wayne's voice stopped her as she turned toward the servants' stairs. "If you ever try to contact me again, if you ever try to claim this child is mine, I'll destroy you. I have lawyers, money, influence. You have nothing. Remember that." Jenny paused at the foot of the stairs, her hand on the banister. For a moment, Wayne thought she might collapse, might beg. Instead, she turned back to him with a look that chilled him to the bone. "You're right, Wayne. I have nothing left to lose. Remember that." As she climbed the stairs to pack her meager belongings, Wayne told himself he felt nothing but relief. The problem was solved. The complication was gone. So why did he feel like he'd just made the biggest mistake of his life? Outside, the storm raged on, as if the very heavens were weeping for what had been lost in that marble foyer. And in a small room above, a young woman packed her few possessions, while her hand rested protectively over the life growing inside her. A life that would prove to be Wayne Hollard's ultimate undoing. Chapter 2. The Angel's Arrival. 4 months of systematic destruction had taught Jenny that Wayne Hollard's influence reached every corner of her former world, choking off opportunities like weeds strangling flowers. The November rain felt like needles against her skin as she stood outside the Grand Meridian Hotel, 7 months pregnant and hollow with hunger. Every domestic agency in the city had the same response. "We're sorry, but we don't have any positions available." The blacklist was invisible, but absolute. Wayne had made sure of that. Her last $60 had gone to rent a basement room from a woman who asked no questions but demanded payment in advance. The baby kicked insistently, a reminder that she was running out of time to find a solution that didn't involve the homeless shelter. "Just one more job interview," she whispered to herself, the words forming small clouds in the cold air. Just one more chance. But even as she said it, Jenny knew the truth. She'd been to 17 interviews in the past month. 17 rejections. Word had spread through the domestic service network like wildfire. Jenny Davis was blacklisted. Wayne Hollard had made good on his threat, and his influence reached further than she'd ever imagined. The baby kicked, a sharp jab against her ribs that made her gasp. She placed a protective hand over her stomach, feeling the strong movements of her child. "I'm sorry, little one," she whispered. "Mama's trying. I promise I'm trying." The dizziness hit her without warning. One moment she was standing upright, the next, the world tilted sideways. Her vision blurred, black spots dancing at the edges. When had she last eaten? Yesterday? The day before? The days had begun to blur together in a haze of hunger and desperation. Jenny's knees buckled, and she felt herself falling toward the unforgiving concrete. This was it. She was going to collapse on the street like some common vagrant. The shame of it was almost worse than the physical pain. But salvation rarely announces itself with trumpet calls. Sometimes it whispers through the kindness of strangers. Strong arms caught her before concrete could claim her, lifting her with surprising gentleness. Through the haze of near consciousness, she glimpsed a face that seemed carved from different clay than Wayne's cold perfection, weathered by experience rather than privilege, with hazel eyes that held depths of genuine concern. Easy there. The voice rumbled like distant thunder, warm and reassuring. I've got you. Ben Norris had been navigating his way through another soulless business dinner when he witnessed the collapse. At 42, he'd built an empire through calculated risks and cold logic, but something about this moment demanded a different response, something human, immediate, real. When did you last eat? He asked gently, supporting her weight with ease. The question broke something inside Jenny. She couldn't remember. A piece of bread this morning? Half a sandwich yesterday? The charity shelter had been full, the food banks had run out, and her pride had prevented her from begging on the streets. I don't, she whispered, tears mixing with the rain on her face. Ben's decision came from 5 years of grief that had taught him to recognize genuine desperation when he saw it. His fiancée Sarah and their unborn son had died because he'd been too busy with business to notice the signs of her depression, too focused on success to see that she needed help. He wouldn't make that mistake again. The position comes with housing and full health care, Ben explained as they sat in the hospital. But I'll need to run a background check and get references, standard procedure. I understand, Jenny said, though her heart sank. References from whom? Wayne had made sure no one would speak for her. Your former employer, Ben continued, consulting the tablet his assistant had brought. Wayne hollered, I'll need to contact him. Jenny's face went white. Please don't. He'll tell you terrible things about me. Ben studied her carefully. In his experience, innocent people didn't fear references, but something in her eyes, a combination of shame and terror, made him reconsider. Tell me what happened, Jenny. The truth. There was something in his voice, a sadness, a loneliness that resonated with her own, that made Jenny stop struggling. Maybe it was the exhaustion. Maybe it was the baby's insistent kicks, or maybe it was just the first genuine kindness she'd experienced in months. Whatever it was, she found herself nodding. Okay, she whispered. Ben's limousine was waiting outside, its driver stepping out with an umbrella the moment he saw them approaching. If the man was surprised to see his employer supporting a pregnant, clearly homeless woman, he didn't show it. St. Mary's Hospital, Marcus, Ben instructed as he helped Jenny into the warm, leather interior. Emergency entrance. As the car pulled away from the curb, Jenny found herself in a world she'd forgotten existed. The seats were butter-soft leather, the air was warm and clean, and there was a minibar stocked with bottles of water that looked like liquid gold to her dehydrated body. Please, Ben said, noticing her staring at the water. Have as much as you need. Jenny's hand shook as she opened the bottle, forcing herself to drink slowly despite her body's screams for more. The cool liquid was the most delicious thing she'd tasted in weeks. What's your name? Ben asked gently, not wanting to pressure her but needing to know something about this woman who had literally fallen into his path. Jenny, she said after a moment's hesitation. Jenny Davis. It's nice to meet you, Jenny, though I wish it were under better circumstances. Jenny studied his face in the dim light of the car. Ben Norris was handsome in a distinguished way, the kind of man who aged like fine wine rather than wilting like a flower. But more than that, there was something inherently trustworthy about him, a steadiness that she'd never encountered in Wayne's volatile presence. Why are you really doing this? She asked again, needing to understand. Ben was quiet for a long moment, his gaze fixed on the city lights streaming past the window. I lost someone once, he said finally. Someone I should have protected. I couldn't save her, but maybe I can save you. There was a weight to his words that Jenny recognized, the burden of guilt, of regret, of chances missed and words left unsaid. She wanted to ask more, but the car was already pulling up to the hospital's emergency entrance. The next few hours passed in a blur of medical tests and concerned faces. Jenny was admitted for observation, hooked up to monitors that beeped reassuringly with her baby's strong heartbeat. The doctors confirmed what she already knew. She was severely malnourished and dehydrated, but the baby was healthy. "You're lucky, doctor," Martinez told her as she reviewed the test results. "Another few days of this, and we might have been looking at serious complications." Lucky. Jenny almost laughed at the word. But as she looked across the room at Ben Norris, who had stayed through every test, every examination, who had held her hand when the IV went in and asked no questions about her circumstances, she realized that maybe the doctor was right. Maybe she was lucky after all. "The baby's fine," Ben said, relief evident in his voice as he approached her bed. "That's what matters." "Thank you," Jenny whispered, tears streaming down her face. "I don't know how to repay you." "You don't need to repay me," Ben said, settling into the chair beside her bed. "But I do have a proposition for you." Jenny tensed, her experience with Wayne having taught her to be wary of men bearing gifts. "I run a children's charity," Ben continued, seemingly oblivious to her sudden wariness. "We're always looking for people with experience in childcare. The position comes with housing, healthcare, and a salary that would support you and your baby." "You don't even know me," Jenny protested. "I know enough," Ben said firmly. "I know you're a fighter. I know you'd do anything to protect your child. And I know you need a chance." Jenny stared at him, this man who had appeared from nowhere and was offering her everything she'd been praying for. What's the catch? No catch, just a chance to start over. As Jenny looked into Ben Norris's honest eyes, she felt something she hadn't experienced in months. Hope. Maybe, just maybe, this was the beginning of something better. "Okay," she whispered. "I'll take it." Ben smiled, and for the first time in 3 months, Jenny smiled back. Chapter 3. Healing Hearts. Morning light had never felt like absolution before, but as Jenny Davis watched the sunrise paint her new apartment in shades of gold, she understood that miracles sometimes came disguised as second chances. 2 weeks had passed since Ben Norris had literally saved her life, and each dawn brought revelations that remade her understanding of herself. The nausea still came with cruel punctuality, but now she had a clean bathroom, soft towels, and the revolutionary luxury of knowing her next meal was guaranteed. More than that, she had purpose again, working with children who understood abandonment, who recognized the hollow ache of being unwanted. A soft knock at her door interrupted her thoughts. Jenny's heart did a little skip. She'd learned to recognize Ben's gentle, respectful knock. Unlike Wayne's demanding pounds that had always made her jump, Ben's presence announced itself with quiet consideration. "Come in," she called, running a hand through her hair self-consciously. Even though Ben had provided her with a clothing allowance and she looked infinitely better than she had weeks ago, she still felt like a mess next to his polished perfection. Ben entered carrying a bag from her favorite bakery and wearing a smile that seemed to light up the room. "Good morning, Jenny. I brought breakfast." Love Scene 1. The Sanctuary. "You don't have to keep doing this," Jenny said, though she couldn't hide the happiness in her voice. Every morning for the past week, Ben had appeared with fresh pastries, fruit, and conversation that made her feel human again. "I know I don't have to," Ben replied, beginning to unpack the bag. "I want to. Besides, you're eating for 2 now." As if on cue, the baby kicked, a strong jab that made Jenny gasp and place both hands on her 7-month belly. The movement was visible through her loose sweater, and Ben's eyes widened with wonder. "Was that—" "A kick," Jenny confirmed, smiling at his expression. "She's been active all morning. I think she smells the cinnamon rolls." "She?" Ben asked, his voice soft with curiosity. "Just a feeling," Jenny said, then hesitated. "Would you Would you like to feel? Ben's face transformed with an emotion so pure and joyful that Jenny's breath caught. May I? Jenny nodded, reaching for his hand. Ben's fingers were warm and slightly trembling as she placed his palm against her belly. For a moment, nothing happened, and Jenny began to worry that the baby had decided to be still. Then it came, a powerful kick right against Ben's hand. "Oh my God," Ben whispered, his eyes filling with tears. "She's so strong." "She likes you," Jenny said, watching Ben's face with growing warmth. "She's been kicking non-stop since you got here." Ben's thumb traced a gentle circle on her belly, and incredibly the baby seemed to respond, pushing back against his touch. "Hello there, little one," he murmured. "I'm Ben. I'm taking care of your mama." Jenny felt tears prick her eyes at the tenderness in his voice. Wayne had never wanted to touch her belly, had never shown the slightest interest in the life growing inside her. But Ben looked at her pregnancy like it was a miracle, like she was carrying something precious and wonderful. "Jenny," Ben said, his voice thick with emotion, "I need you to know something. Whatever brought you to that street corner, whatever happened before, none of it matters to me. All that matters is that you're here now, and you're safe." The tears came then, 3 months of suppressed emotion finally breaking free. Ben immediately pulled her into his arms, holding her as she sobbed against his chest. His embrace was nothing like Wayne's possessive holds. This was sanctuary, comfort, home. "I'm sorry," Jenny gasped through her tears. "I'm such a mess." "You're not a mess," Ben said firmly, his hand stroking her hair. "You're a woman who's been through hell and came out fighting. You're a mother who would do anything to protect her child. You're remarkable, Jenny Davis." Jenny pulled back to look at him, searching his face for any sign of deception. But all she saw was honesty, kindness, and something that made her heart skip. Genuine affection. "How do you do it?" she whispered. "Do what?" "Make me feel like I'm worth something again." Ben's hands framed her face gently, his thumbs brushing away her tears. "Because you are worth something. You're worth everything." Love Scene 2. The Lullaby. 6 weeks later, Jenny's labor came suddenly and intensely. Hope arrived at 36 weeks, not premature enough for serious complications, but small enough to require careful monitoring. Ben stayed through every moment, holding Jenny's hand through contractions and tears when Hope finally cried her way into the world. "She's perfect," Ben whispered, his voice filled with awe as he looked down at the 5-pound bundle in Jenny's arms. Small but perfect. "Would you like to hold her?" Jenny asked, the question carrying more weight than either of them acknowledged. When Ben took Hope in his arms, something shifted in the universe. The baby quieted immediately, her dark eyes focusing on his face with the intensity that only newborns possessed. "Hello, Hope," Ben murmured, his voice thick with emotion. "I'm Ben. I helped bring you into this world, and I promise you'll never want for love or protection." Over the following weeks, as Hope grew stronger and Jenny recovered, Ben began the complex legal process of establishing his role in their lives. He consulted with family attorneys, learned about adoption procedures, and started the paperwork that would eventually allow him to claim Hope as his own, if Jenny agreed. "Hello, Hope," Ben murmured, his voice soft with wonder. "I'm Ben. I helped your mama bring you into this world, and I'm going to help her take care of you." Jenny watched through tears as this gentle man cradled her daughter like she was made of spun glass. Ben began to hum, a low, melodious sound that seemed to come from somewhere deep in his chest. Hope's eyes drifted closed, her tiny fist curling around Ben's finger. "What song is that?" Jenny asked softly. "Something my mother used to sing to me," Ben replied, never taking his eyes off Hope. "I never thought I'd have a reason to sing it again." The pain in his voice made Jenny's heart ache. "Ben, what happened to her? The person you lost?" Ben was quiet for a long moment, his gaze still fixed on Hope's sleeping face. "Her name was Sarah. She was my fiancée. She died in a car accident 5 years ago, along with our unborn son." Jenny's breath caught. "Oh, Ben, I'm so sorry." "I blamed myself for a long time," Ben continued, his voice barely above a whisper. "If I hadn't been working so late, if I had insisted on driving her to the appointment, if I had been there." He shook his head. "I threw myself into work, into building the foundation, into anything that would keep me from thinking about what I'd lost." "And now?" Jenny asked gently. Ben looked up at her, and Jenny saw something in his eyes that made her heart race. "Now, I think maybe I was meant to find you, both of you. Maybe Sarah sent me to that street corner that night." "Ben, I know it's too soon," Ben said quickly, misreading her expression. "I know you're not ready for anything like that. But I need you to know, Jenny, what I feel for you, it's real. And what I feel for Hope." He looked down at the baby still sleeping in his arms. "I love her like she's my own." Jenny felt her world shift on its axis. This man, this wonderful, damaged, beautiful man, was offering her everything she'd dreamed of and never dared hope for. Not just love, but genuine partnership. Not just acceptance, but celebration. "I love you too," she whispered, the words slipping out before she could stop them. Ben's eyes widened, hope and joy warring across his features. "You do." "I do. I love you, Ben Norris, and I love the way you love my daughter." Ben leaned over carefully, mindful of the baby in his arms, and pressed a gentle kiss to Jenny's forehead. "We're going to be okay," he murmured against her skin. "All 3 of us." As Jenny watched Ben continue to hum to Hope, she felt something she hadn't experienced in so long she'd forgotten what it was called. Happiness. Pure, uncomplicated happiness. Wayne Hollard had thrown her away like garbage, but Ben Norris had seen her worth. Wayne had denied his own child, but Ben was already claiming Hope as his own. The contrast was so stark it took her breath away. "Ben," she said softly, "When I'm ready, when we're ready, I want to try. Really try. At this." Ben's smile was radiant. "I'll wait as long as you need, Jenny. I'll wait forever if I have to." As the sun rose over the city, painting the hospital room in warm, golden light, Jenny Davis realized that sometimes the worst thing that could happen to you was actually the beginning of the best thing. Wayne's cruelty had led her to Ben's kindness. Wayne's rejection had brought her to Ben's acceptance. And someday, she thought drowsily as she watched Ben rock her daughter to sleep, someday Wayne would realize what he'd lost. But by then, it would be far too late. Chapter 4. Growing into Love. The symphony of childhood laughter had become the soundtrack to Ben Norris's resurrection. And as Hope's 18-month-old voice called his name, he felt his heart expand beyond the boundaries he'd built around it. "Daddy Ben! Daddy Ben!" Hope launched herself across the penthouse's polished floors, her chubby arms outstretched and her face radiant with the kind of pure joy that only children possessed. Ben swept her up effortlessly, her giggles cascading through the space like musical notes finding their harmony. "There's my princess," he murmured, breathing in the scent of baby shampoo and innocence. "Were you an angel for Mama today?" "I was very, very good," Hope announced with the solemnity of someone making a sacred vow, though the telltale chocolate smears around her mouth suggested a more complex truth. Jenny appeared in the doorway, her hair slightly mussed, and her designer dress wrinkled, but her face glowing with happiness. The transformation in her over the past 1.5 years had been remarkable. Gone was the hollow-cheeked woman who had collapsed outside the Grand Meridian. In her place stood a confident, radiant woman who had found her place in the world. Define every good, Jenny said with a laugh, reaching up to wipe chocolate from Hope's face, because someone decided that finger painting was more fun than eating lunch. Finger painting is art, Mama, Hope said seriously, using the advanced vocabulary that never failed to amaze Ben. Daddy Ben says art is important. Important, Ben corrected gently, though his heart swelled every time Hope called him Daddy. And yes, it is very important. Jenny rolled her eyes, but her smile was warm. You're going to spoil her completely. That's what daddies are for, Ben replied, the words slipping out naturally. It had been months since he'd stopped correcting himself, stopped adding the qualifier Ben to the title. Hope was his daughter in every way that mattered, and everyone who saw them together knew it. Love Scene 3. The Bedtime Story. Later that evening, after Hope had been bathed and dressed in her favorite princess pajamas, Ben settled into the rocking chair in her nursery while Jenny curled up on the small sofa nearby. This had become their nightly ritual, one that Ben treasured more than any business deal or board meeting. Story time, Hope announced, climbing onto Ben's lap with a well-worn copy of The Princess and the Pea. Again? Ben asked with mock surprise. Are you sure you don't want to hear about the 3 little pigs? No pigs, Hope said firmly. Princess. Ben caught Jenny's eye and winked. Hope had been obsessed with princess stories lately, and Ben suspected it had something to do with the way she'd started calling Jenny my princess mama. Once upon a time, Ben began, his voice taking on the storytelling cadence that never failed to captivate Hope. There was a prince who was looking for a real princess to marry. As he read, Ben was acutely aware of Jenny's presence across the room. She'd been living in the penthouse for 6 months now, having moved in when Hope started walking and needed more space to explore. The arrangement was supposed to be temporary, practical, but Ben couldn't imagine his home without them anymore. The prince didn't know if she was a real princess, Ben continued, his voice dropping to a whisper as Hope's eyes grew heavy. So his mother decided to test her. With the pea, Hope mumbled sleepily, her head falling against Ben's chest. With the pea, Ben confirmed, his hand stroking her hair. And do you know what happened? But Hope was already asleep, her small body completely relaxed in his arms. Ben continued to rock her gently, unwilling to break the spell of the moment. She's beautiful when she sleeps, Jenny whispered, moving closer to admire her daughter. She's beautiful all the time, Ben replied softly, just like her mother. Jenny blushed, even after all these months of Ben's gentle compliments. You don't have to say things like that. I say them because they're true. Ben carefully stood, still holding Hope. I think someone is ready for her bed. Together they tucked Hope into her crib, Ben placing her favorite stuffed elephant beside her while Jenny pulled the soft blanket up to her chin. The domestic scene felt so natural, so right, that Ben had to resist the urge to reach for Jenny's hand. Ben, Jenny said as they stood in the doorway watching their daughter sleep. I need to tell you something. Ben's heart skipped. Over the months he'd learned to read Jenny's moods, and there was something different in her voice tonight. What is it? I got a call today from a lawyer. Jenny's voice was carefully neutral, but Ben could see the tension in her shoulders. A lawyer? Ben's protective instincts immediately flared. Jenny, what's wrong? It's about Hope, about her biological father's legal rights. The words hit Ben like a physical blow. Over the past 18 months, he'd been consulting with family law attorneys about the adoption process. The legal reality was complex. Wayne still had parental rights, even though he'd abandoned Jenny and refused to acknowledge Hope. What did the lawyer say? Ben asked, his voice carefully controlled. Jenny took a shaky breath. Wayne's attorney contacted mine. Apparently Wayne has been struggling financially. His business is failing and he's desperate for money. He's willing to voluntarily terminate his parental rights and sign away any claim to Hope. In exchange for what? $50,000. And a signed agreement that neither Hope nor I will ever contact him or his family. He wants to pretend we never existed. Ben felt rage and relief war in his chest. Rage that Wayne would try to profit from abandoning his daughter. Relief that there was finally a path forward. And what do you want to do? Jenny looked through the doorway at Hope, sleeping peacefully in her crib. I want him gone from our lives forever. I want you to be Hope's legal father. I want us to be a real family. We already are a real family, Ben said fiercely, but yes, I'll pay whatever it takes to make it official. She is loved and wanted, Ben said fiercely, by both of us. I know. That's why. Jenny turned to face him fully, her eyes bright with unshed tears. Ben, if I sign those papers, if I let him terminate his rights, would you consider adopting Hope? Legally, I know it's a lot to ask and I know we're not married, but… Yes. The word came out so quickly, so emphatically, that Jenny blinked in surprise. Yes, she repeated. Yes, I'll adopt her. Yes, I want to be her legal father. Yes to all of it. Ben reached for Jenny's hands, holding them tightly. Jenny, I've loved Hope since the moment I held her in the hospital. I've been her father in every way that matters for over a year. Making it legal would be an honor. Jenny burst into tears, throwing her arms around Ben's neck. Thank you, she sobbed against his shoulder. Thank you for loving us. Ben held her close, breathing in the scent of her hair, feeling the rightness of having her in his arms. Jenny, there's something I need to tell you too. She pulled back to look at him, wiping at her tears. What? Ben took a deep breath, knowing that what he was about to say would change everything between them. I'm in love with you. Not just fond of you. Not just grateful for what you brought to my life. I'm completely, utterly, hopelessly in love with you. Jenny's breath caught. Ben. I know it's complicated, Ben continued quickly. I know you've been hurt before, and I know you need time. But I needed you to know, especially now, that my feelings for Hope aren't separate from my feelings for you. I love you both. I want to be a family with you both. I love you too, Jenny whispered, the words coming out in a rush. I've been in love with you for months, but I was scared. Scared that I was just grateful. Scared that you only wanted to help. Scared that I was reading too much into everything. You weren't reading too much into anything, Ben assured her, his hands framing her face. Every smile, every look, every moment we've shared, it's all been real for me. For me too, Jenny said, standing on her tiptoes to press a soft kiss to his lips. The kiss was gentle, tentative at first, then deeper, as months of suppressed emotion finally found expression. When they broke apart, both were breathing hard. So what happens now? Jenny asked. Now we take it one day at a time, Ben said, resting his forehead against hers. We'll sign the adoption papers, we'll make this family official, and we'll see where this beautiful thing between us leads. From the nursery came a soft whimper, and both of them smiled. Mama, Hope called sleepily. I'll go, Jenny said, but Ben caught her hand. We'll go, he corrected, together. As they walked back into the nursery where Hope was sitting up in her crib, rubbing her eyes and looking for comfort, Ben felt a profound sense of completeness. This was his family, not the one he'd planned, but the one he'd been given, the one he'd chosen. Daddy Ben, Hope said, reaching for him. Bad dream. It's okay, sweetheart, Ben said, lifting her into his arms. Daddy's here, Mama's here, you're safe. Jenny moved to his side, and Hope reached for her too, so they were all connected in a circle of warmth and love. Always safe, Jenny murmured, kissing Hope's forehead. As Ben looked at his girls, his daughter and the woman he loved, he thought about the man who had walked away from this miracle, the man who had chosen pride over love, reputation over family. Someday, that man would realize what he'd given up. But by then, Hope would be Ben's daughter in every legal sense, and Jenny would hopefully be his wife. The family that man had rejected would be complete without him, and Ben couldn't help but think that justice had never been so sweet. Chapter 5. The Queen's Rise transformation was a word Jenny had learned to respect. It spoke of alchemy, of base metal becoming gold, of phoenixes rising from ashes with wings that could carry them to impossible heights. She stood before the floor-to-ceiling mirror in her walk-in closet, adjusting the flowing lines of an evening gown that cost more than her old yearly salary. The reflection showed a woman she was still learning to recognize. Confident posture speaking of earned authority, intelligent eyes bright with purpose, skin glowing with the radiance that came from being cherished without conditions. The transformation hadn't been overnight magic. It had been 3 years of deliberate, strategic building. Jenny had earned her MBA through Northwestern's executive program while managing foundation operations, studying late into the night after Hope went to sleep. Her thesis on trauma-informed charitable giving had been published in 3 academic journals, establishing her as a thought leader rather than just a wealthy man's partner. But tonight's emergency board meeting would test everything she'd built. "The Morrison account has been compromised," Margaret Whitmore announced grimly to the assembled board members. "Someone's been spreading rumors about financial impropriety. 3 major donors are threatening to pull funding." Jenny felt her blood run cold, but her voice remained steady. "What kind of rumors?" "Claims that you've been embezzling funds, that your background is fabricated, that you're not qualified for your position." Margaret's expression was grim. "The source appears to be Wayne Hollard." The room fell silent. Everyone knew the basics of Jenny's story, that she'd risen from difficult circumstances, but few knew the specific details about Wayne. "Then we fight back with facts," Jenny said firmly, moving to the presentation screen. "Margaret, pull up our audit results. Robert, I need our impact statistics. If Wayne wants a war, he'll get one." "Thank you, sweetheart," Jenny said, kneeling down to Hope's level. "Are you excited to see Daddy Ben's speech tonight?" "Yes." Hope clapped her hands. "Daddy Ben is the best speaker in the whole world." Jenny laughed, her heart warming at the pure adoration in her daughter's voice. Hope had been legally Ben's daughter for over a year now, and the adoption had felt more like a celebration than a legal proceeding. Her birth certificate had been amended, her last name changed to Norris, and every trace of Wayne Hollard's DNA had been legally erased from her life. "Mrs. Norris," a soft voice called from the hallway. "Mr. Norris asked me to tell you that the car is ready." Mrs. Norris. Jenny still felt a thrill every time she heard the title, even though she and Ben weren't married yet. The staff had started using it naturally, and Ben had never corrected them. If anything, he seemed to enjoy the presumption as much as she did. "We'll be right down, Maria," Jenny called back, then turned to Hope. "Ready to go show everyone how beautiful the Norris girls are?" Hope giggled and took Jenny's hand, and together they walked through the penthouse that had become their home. The space had been transformed over the past 2 years, evolving from Ben's bachelor pad into a warm family residence. Hope's artwork covered the refrigerator, toys were scattered in comfortable corners, and family photos lined the mantelpiece. Ben was waiting by the elevator, looking devastatingly handsome in his custom tuxedo. At 44, he had aged into his features beautifully, carrying himself with the confidence of a man who had everything he'd ever wanted. "My 2 favorite ladies," he said, his eyes lighting up as he saw them. "You both look absolutely stunning. Daddy Ben, do you think people will know we're a family?" Hope asked seriously. "Oh, I think they'll definitely know," Ben said, lifting Hope into his arms. "We're going to be the most beautiful family at the whole gala." Jenny felt tears prick her eyes at the casual way Ben claimed them as his family. Even after all this time, his unconditional love still took her breath away. The charity gala was being held at the Grand Meridian Hotel, the same hotel where Ben had first found Jenny collapsed on the sidewalk. The irony wasn't lost on either of them as their limousine pulled up to the red carpet entrance. "Are you ready for this?" Ben asked quietly as photographers began snapping pictures of arriving guests. Jenny looked out at the crowd of society's elite, people who moved in circles she'd once only glimpsed from the outside. 2 years ago, she would have been invisible to them. Tonight, she would be the center of attention as the woman who had captured the heart of one of the city's most eligible bachelors. "I'm ready," she said, and meant it. The moment they stepped out of the car, the cameras went wild. Ben Norris rarely made public appearances with his family, and when he did, the media took notice. Jenny had learned to handle the attention with grace, smiling warmly while keeping Hope close to her side. "Mr. Norris, is it true you're planning to propose soon?" "Jenny, what's it like dating one of the city's most powerful men?" "Hope, can you wave for the cameras, sweetie?" Ben guided them through the gauntlet of reporters with practiced ease, his hand protectively on Jenny's back. They had become experts at navigating these events together, presenting a united front that spoke of genuine partnership rather than convenient arrangement. Inside the ballroom, Jenny was in her element. As the director of Bright Futures Foundation, she had organized tonight's gala herself, and every detail reflected her vision and hard work. The theme was second chances, and the irony of her own life story wasn't lost on anyone in attendance. "Jenny." She turned to see Margaret Whitmore, one of the city's most prominent socialites, approaching with a group of equally well-dressed women. These were the wives and daughters of old money, women who had initially viewed Jenny with suspicion but had gradually come to respect her intelligence and dedication. "Margaret, you look wonderful," Jenny said warmly. "Thank you so much for your donation to the scholarship fund." "Oh, it was nothing compared to what you've accomplished with this foundation," Margaret replied. "Did you see the article in City magazine? They called you the woman who transformed charity work in our city." Jenny blushed slightly. The article had been a surprise, featuring her on the cover with the headline, "From Tragedy to Triumph, the Jenny Norris Story." While it hadn't revealed the specific details of her past, it had painted her as an inspiring figure who had overcome adversity to become a force for good. "The real credit goes to Ben," Jenny said modestly. "I'm just trying to live up to his vision." "Nonsense," said another woman, Victoria Manning, whose husband owned half the city's commercial real estate. "Ben may have founded the organization, but you've given it soul. The way you connect with those families, the programs you've developed, that's all you." As the women continued to praise her work, Jenny felt a deep sense of satisfaction. She had found her purpose, her calling, and it had nothing to do with the man who had once treated her like she was worthless. Across the room she spotted Ben, deep in conversation with several business leaders, Hope perched on his hip as if she belonged at every high-level meeting. The sight made her heart swell with pride and love. "You know," Margaret said, following her gaze, "I've known Ben Norris for 15 years, and I've never seen him as happy as he is with you and Hope. You've transformed him just as much as he's transformed you." Jenny smiled, thinking of the broken man who had rescued her that night 2 years ago. Ben had been successful, wealthy, respected, but he'd been empty inside, going through the motions of living without really being alive. They had healed each other, she realized. Their love had been mutual salvation. "Ladies and gentlemen," the Master of Ceremonies announced from the stage, "please welcome the founder of Bright Futures Foundation, Mr. Ben Norris." The crowd erupted in applause as Ben made his way to the stage, but not before stopping to kiss Jenny softly and whisper in her ear. "This is all because of you," he said. "Everything good in my life started the night I found you." As Ben began his speech, talking about second chances and the power of love to transform lives, Jenny felt a profound sense of completeness. She had risen from the ashes of her old life to become something she'd never imagined possible, not just Ben's partner, but a force for good in her own right. She was no longer Jenny Davis, the desperate maid who had begged for scraps of affection. She was Jenny Norris in all but legal name, a woman who commanded respect, wielded influence, and was deeply, completely loved. And somewhere in the city, she knew Wayne Hollard was going about his empty life, never knowing that the woman he'd discarded had become everything he'd never be. Truly powerful, genuinely respected, and unconditionally loved. The transformation was complete. The Queen had risen. And the best part, this was only the beginning. Chapter 6. The Shock Encounter. Recognition struck Wayne Hollard like lightning splitting a dead tree, sudden, devastating, leaving nothing but scorched earth where certainty used to grow. He had been drowning his failures in aged whiskey, each sip a bitter reminder of how far he'd fallen from grace. The Grand Meridian's charity gala mocked him with its opulence, crystal chandeliers he could no longer afford, champagne that cost more than his monthly rent, faces that once smiled at his presence, now turning away in practiced indifference. But none of his humiliation mattered when he saw her. She moved through the crowd like royalty reviewing her subjects, wearing elegance like armor and confidence like a crown. Her black gown whispered of designer ateliers and unlimited budgets, while diamonds at her throat caught light like captured stars. This woman commanded attention without demanding it, drew respect like flowers drew sunlight. It couldn't be Jenny. It absolutely could not be the desperate maid he'd discarded like yesterday's newspaper. Wayne had purchased his ticket through a third-party broker, paying triple face value for the privilege of watching his former life from the shadows. The gala's security was tight, but his name wasn't on any watch lists yet. He was still technically just another wealthy businessman down on his luck. But as he stood at the edge of the ballroom, clutching his whiskey like a lifeline, Wayne understood that he was witnessing something unprecedented. Jenny wasn't just attending this event, she was hosting it. Her name was on the program as foundation director, her photograph prominently displayed near the entrance. 500 of the city's most influential people had come to celebrate her work. "Excuse me," Wayne said, his voice coming out rougher than intended as he approached the circle of admirers surrounding Jenny. The group turned toward him with the polite attention given to strangers at charity events. But Wayne watched as recognition flickered across Jenny's face, followed immediately by something that chilled him to the bone: complete indifference. "Wayne Hollard," she said, her tone as neutral as if she were greeting a waiter. "How unexpected." Margaret Whitmore, standing beside Jenny, frowned slightly. "I'm sorry, do you two know each other?" "We have some ancient history," Jenny replied smoothly. "Nothing worth discussing at such a lovely event." "Jenny has revolutionized the way we approach charitable giving in this city," gushed Margaret Whitmore, one of the society matrons Wayne had been trying to court for business investments. "The Bright Futures Foundation has become the gold standard for effective philanthropy." "Please, you're too kind," Jenny replied with a modest smile that made Wayne's chest tighten with recognition. "I'm just trying to make sure every child gets the second chance they deserve." Second chances. The words hit Wayne like a physical blow. Was this some kind of cosmic joke? The woman he had denied a second chance had somehow found one anyway, and it had elevated her beyond his wildest imagination. "Excuse me," Wayne said, his voice coming out rougher than intended. The group turned toward him, and Wayne watched as Jenny's face went through a series of emotions: surprise, recognition, and then something that chilled him to the bone: complete indifference. "Wayne," she said, her tone as neutral as if she were greeting a casual acquaintance. "How unexpected to see you here." The others in the group looked between them with interest, clearly sensing some history, but not understanding its nature. "I could say the same," Wayne managed, his eyes taking in every detail of her transformation. Up close, the change was even more dramatic. Her skin glowed with health and happiness, her eyes sparkled with intelligence and confidence, and she carried herself like royalty. "You look different." 2 years will do that to a person," Jenny replied calmly. "Excuse me, I should get back to—" "Wait!" Wayne said desperately, reaching out as if to touch her arm. Jenny stepped back smoothly, avoiding his touch while maintaining her composure. "I'm sorry, but I'm rather busy this evening. I'm sure you understand." The dismissal was polite but absolute. Wayne stood there watching as she turned back to her companions and continued her conversation as if he had never interrupted, as if he didn't exist. "Who was that?" he heard someone ask as Jenny moved away. "No one important," came her reply, the words carrying clearly back to where Wayne stood frozen. "No one important." The phrase echoed in his mind as he watched Jenny glide through the crowd, stopping to chat with dignitaries and business leaders who hung on her every word. She had just delivered the most devastating blow he'd ever received, and she'd done it with the casual ease of someone swatting away a fly. Wayne followed at a distance, unable to tear his eyes away from the spectacle of Jenny's transformation. Everywhere she went, people gravitated toward her. She was introduced as the director of the Bright Futures Foundation, a position that commanded immediate respect and attention. "She's incredible, isn't she?" Wayne turned to find himself being addressed by Robert Chen, a tech billionaire whose good opinion could make or break businesses. "I'm sorry," Wayne croaked. "Jenny Norris," Chen clarified. "One of the most impressive women I've ever met. Brilliant, compassionate, effective. Ben Norris is a lucky man." "Ben Norris?" Wayne's blood turned to ice. "She's with Ben Norris?" "Oh yes, for over 2 years now. Beautiful family they have together. Have you met their daughter? Adorable little girl." Their daughter. Wayne felt the ground shift beneath his feet. The baby, his baby, was being raised by Ben Norris. One of the most powerful, respected men in the city had claimed Wayne's child as his own. "Excuse me," Wayne mumbled, stumbling away from Chen's curious gaze. He found a quiet corner near the bar and ordered another drink, his hands shaking as he tried to process what he'd learned. Jenny wasn't just surviving, she was thriving. She wasn't just getting by, she was prospering beyond his wildest dreams. And she was doing it all with another man, a better man, who had given her everything Wayne had refused to offer. As if summoned by his tortured thoughts, Ben Norris himself appeared on the stage to give the evening's keynote address. Wayne watched with growing horror as the man introduced Jenny as his inspiration, his partner, his everything. The crowd erupted in applause as Jenny joined Ben on stage, looking every inch the perfect partner to one of the city's most influential figures. 2 years ago," Ben said, his arm around Jenny's waist, "I thought I had everything a man could want. I was wrong. I had success, but I didn't have purpose. I had wealth, but I didn't have joy. Then I met this incredible woman, and she showed me what real richness looks like." Wayne watched in agony as Ben gazed at Jenny with obvious adoration, as she smiled back at him with genuine love, as they presented a united front that spoke of deep partnership and mutual respect. "Jenny has taught me that love isn't something you take," Ben continued. "It's something you give. And the more you give, the more you receive in return." The words were like daggers to Wayne's heart. He thought of that night 2 years ago, of the cruel things he'd said, of the way he'd thrown Jenny out like garbage. He'd taken everything from her, and given nothing in return. And now she was standing on a stage, beloved and respected, while he stood in the shadows, forgotten and alone. As the evening wore on, Wayne continued to watch from afar, unable to look away from the life he might have had. He saw Jenny dancing with Ben, laughing at his jokes, accepting congratulations from the city's elite. He saw them with their daughter, his biological child, who clearly adored them both. The little girl had Jenny's eyes and features, but she looked at Ben with the pure love of a child for her father. Wayne realized with crushing certainty that he was a stranger to his own offspring, a man who had forfeited any claim to her love when he denied her existence. As the evening drew to a close, Wayne made one last desperate attempt to speak with Jenny. He waited by the coat check, knowing she would have to pass by on her way out. "Jenny, please," he said when she appeared, flanked by Ben and their daughter. "Can we talk? Just for a minute?" Jenny paused, her expression politely curious. "I'm sorry, but I don't think we have anything to discuss." "About the baby," Wayne pressed, his voice cracking. "About Hope." Ben stepped forward protectively, his face hardening. "I think you should leave my wife alone." Wife. The word hit Wayne like a physical blow. "Your wife." "In every way that matters," Ben said firmly, "and Hope is my daughter, legally, officially, and in every way that counts." Wayne looked at the family before him, the woman he'd thrown away, the man who'd claimed her, and the child who would never know his name. They were perfect together, complete in a way that he'd never allowed them to be with him. "I made a mistake," Wayne whispered, the admission torn from his soul. Jenny's expression didn't change. "Yes, you did. But it wasn't a mistake for us. It was a blessing." As they walked away, Wayne heard Hope's voice floating back to him. "Daddy Ben, who was that man?" "No one important, sweetheart," came Ben's gentle reply. "No one important at all." Wayne stood alone in the emptying ballroom, watching through the windows as his former life drove away in a limousine, surrounded by everything he'd lost and everything he'd never deserve. The Queen had risen, and the fool who'd cast her aside was left with nothing but the ashes of his own making. Chapter 7. Desperate Attempts. Obsession was a cancer that ate everything healthy in Wayne Hollard's life, leaving only the tumor of his own desperate hunger growing where his soul used to be. The morning after the gala found him surrounded by the debris of his investigation, newspaper clippings, printed articles, photographs stolen from society pages, all featuring the couple who had become the city's golden standard for love and success. His coffee table looked like the workspace of a stalker, which, he was beginning to realize, was exactly what he'd become. Jenny Norris revolutionizes youth education with groundbreaking initiative. Power couple Ben and Jenny Norris announce $50 million healthcare donation. The Norris Foundation, how love built an empire of compassion. Norris. That name was everywhere now, spoken with reverence in circles that once whispered the Hollard name with respect. She had taken his place in society's hierarchy, claiming the influence and admiration he'd squandered through arrogance and stupidity. Everything Wayne had convinced himself he was too good for. Wayne's financial empire had been cracking for 2 years before his obsession with Jenny delivered the final blow. The Hollard real estate dynasty, built over 3 generations, was leveraged to the breaking point when the commercial market collapsed. Wayne's desperate attempts to stay afloat through high-risk investments had only accelerated the bleeding. But it was his fixation on Jenny that transformed manageable decline into total catastrophe. While she built her new life with methodical precision, Wayne spent 18 months in a destructive spiral, missing crucial business meetings to stalk charity events, ignoring legal deadlines to plan accidental encounters. spending his remaining capital on private investigators to track her movements. The morning he read about her engagement to Ben Norris in the society pages, Wayne made the decision that would destroy what little remained of his life. He liquidated everything: his remaining properties, his investment portfolio, even his mother's jewelry, to fund one last desperate campaign to win Jenny back. Within 6 months, Wayne Hollard went from millionaire to debtor. The banks foreclosed on his properties, creditors seized his assets, and former business partners crossed the street to avoid him. All while Jenny rose higher in society, her success a constant reminder of his spectacular failure. The line went dead. Jenny had anticipated his attempts and blocked them preemptively. His email to the Foundation's general inbox received an automated response directing him to their website for general inquiries. Personal emails bounced back as undeliverable. Social media messages disappeared into the void. Every avenue of digital contact had been systematically closed. Desperation drove Wayne to physical stalking. He began showing up at the Foundation's offices, but security guards, professional, polite, and utterly immovable, prevented him from entering the building. The second attempt was an email to the Foundation's general inbox, marked urgent and marked for Jenny's personal attention. Wayne poured his heart into that email, explaining how sorry he was, how he'd made a terrible mistake, how he wanted to make things right. The automatic reply thanked him for his interest in the Foundation's work and informed him that someone would respond within 5 business days. No one ever did. Desperation drove Wayne to more drastic measures. He began showing up at places he knew Jenny would be: charity events, business lunches, society gatherings. But somehow, she was always surrounded by people, always protected, always just out of reach. At the Children's Hospital Gala, Wayne managed to get within 10 feet of her before Ben Norris himself stepped into his path. "I think you should leave," Ben said quietly, his voice carrying an authority that made Wayne's knees weak. "I just want to talk to her," Wayne pleaded. 5 minutes, that's all I'm asking for." "She doesn't want to talk to you," Ben replied, his hazel eyes cold as winter, "and I suggest you respect that." "She's the mother of my child," Wayne said desperately. "No," Ben corrected, his voice deadly calm. "She's the mother of my daughter, legally, officially, and in every way that matters. You gave up any claim to that title the night you threw them out into the rain." The words hit Wayne like physical blows. He watched helplessly as Ben returned to Jenny's side, whispering something in her ear that made her nod and smile. They left the gala early, surrounded by a security detail that Wayne hadn't even noticed until they were escorting him toward the exit. Wayne's next attempt was more public, more desperate. He waited outside the Foundation's offices, hoping to catch Jenny as she arrived for work. When her car pulled up, not Ben's limousine but a modest sedan with tinted windows, Wayne stepped forward. "Jenny, please," he called out as she emerged from the vehicle. "I just need to explain." Jenny paused, looking at him with an expression that chilled him to the bone. It wasn't anger or hurt or even disgust. It was pity. "Wayne," she said calmly, as her security detail positioned themselves protectively around her, "you need to stop this." "I made a mistake," Wayne said, the words tumbling out in a rush. "I was scared, I was stupid, I didn't know what I was doing. But I love you, Jenny. I've always loved you." Jenny's laugh was soft but devastating. "You don't know what love is, Wayne. You never did." "I can learn," Wayne begged. "Give me a chance to prove it. Let me be a father to Hope. Let me—" "Hope has a father," Jenny interrupted, her voice as sharp as a blade. "A wonderful, loving father who's been there for every scraped knee, every bedtime story, every milestone you'll never see. You're nothing to her, Wayne, less than nothing. You're just a stranger who shares some DNA." The words were delivered with surgical precision, designed to cut deep. Wayne felt something break inside his chest. "But I'm her biological father," he whispered. "Biology isn't what makes a family," Jenny said firmly. "Love is. Commitment is. Being there when it matters is. You've never been any of those things." Wayne watched helplessly as Jenny walked into the building, leaving him standing on the sidewalk like a beggar. The security guards remained at their posts, making it clear that any attempt to follow would be unwelcome. His final, most desperate attempt came 3 weeks later at the mayor's annual business awards. Wayne had sold his watch, one of the last valuable things he owned, to buy a ticket to the black tie event. He knew Jenny and Ben would be there. They were receiving an award for their charitable work. Wayne waited until they were on stage, accepting their recognition with grace and humility. The irony wasn't lost on him. Jenny was being celebrated for helping the less fortunate, while he had become one of them. When they stepped off the stage, Wayne intercepted them near the bar. "Congratulations," he said, his voice barely steady. "You both deserve this recognition." Ben immediately stepped forward, but Jenny placed a gentle hand on his arm. "It's all right," she said softly. "Let him speak." Wayne felt a surge of hope at her words. Maybe she was finally ready to listen, ready to forgive. "I've been thinking about what you said," Wayne began. "About love, about family. You're right. I didn't know what those things meant. But I do now." "Do you?" Jenny asked, her voice deceptively mild. "Yes, I know I hurt you. I know I failed Hope, but I want to make it right. I want to be the man you thought I was, the father Hope deserves." Jenny studied his face for a long moment, and Wayne held his breath, hoping against hope that he might see some softness there, some sign of forgiveness. Instead, she smiled, a beautiful, terrible smile that made his blood run cold. "Wayne," she said, her voice carrying clearly over the din of the party, "do you see that woman over there, the one in the red dress?" Wayne followed her gaze to where a distinguished-looking woman in her 50s was holding court near the silent auction tables. "That's Margaret Whitmore," Jenny continued. "She's on the board of 3 hospitals, 2 universities, and the City Planning Commission. The man she's talking to? Robert Chen, who controls more than half the tech infrastructure in this city. And the couple next to them? The Hendersons, who own the largest media conglomerate on the East Coast." Wayne nodded, not understanding where this was going. "They all know who I am," Jenny said, her voice growing stronger. "They respect me. They value my opinion. They seek my advice on matters that affect millions of people. Do you know why?" Wayne shook his head, though he was beginning to suspect where this was leading. "Because I've earned it," Jenny said, her words cutting through him like knives. "Because I've proven myself to be intelligent, capable, and trustworthy. Because I've used the opportunities I've been given to make a real difference in people's lives." She stepped closer, and Wayne caught a whiff of her perfume. Expensive, sophisticated, nothing like the simple soap she'd used when she cleaned his house. "These people have the power to make or break careers, Wayne. A word from any of them can open doors or slam them shut forever. And they all love me." Wayne felt the blood drain from his face as the implications of her words sank in. "So here's what's going to happen," Jenny continued, her voice never rising above a conversational tone. "You're going to stop calling my office. You're going to stop showing up at events where you know I'll be. You're going to disappear from my life completely. Because if you don't, I'm going to have a few conversations with my friends about Wayne Hollard and his business practices." "You wouldn't," Wayne whispered. "Try me," Jenny said, her smile never wavering. "I wonder what Margaret would think about a man who throws pregnant women out into the rain. I wonder what Robert would say about someone who abandons his own child. I wonder how the Hendersons' newspapers would cover that story." Wayne stared at her in horror, finally understanding the full extent of his situation. The woman he'd once dismissed as just a maid now moved in circles that could destroy him with a whisper. She had the power to ruin what was left of his reputation, his business, his entire life. "You've become everything I never was," he said, the admission torn from his soul. "Yes," Jenny agreed, her voice soft but implacable. "I've become everything you threw away, everything you told me I could never be. And the beautiful irony, Wayne, is that I have you to thank for it." "What do you mean?" Wayne asked, though he wasn't sure he wanted to know. "If you hadn't been so cruel, so heartless, I never would have ended up on that street corner. I never would have met Ben. I never would have discovered what real love looks like, what it feels like to be truly valued and cherished." Jenny's eyes sparkled with something that might have been gratitude. "Your cruelty led me to my destiny. Your rejection became my salvation." Wayne felt his world crumble around him. "Jenny, please, no," she said firmly. "There is no please anymore, Wayne. There are no second chances for men who waste their first ones so completely. You had everything you needed to be happy. You had me. You had our child, you had love freely given, and you threw it all away because your pride mattered more than our hearts." Ben appeared at Jenny's side, having finished speaking with the mayor. He took in the scene with a quick glance, his arm sliding protectively around Jenny's waist. "Is everything all right?" Ben asked, though his tone suggested he knew exactly what was happening. "Everything's perfect," Jenny said, not taking her eyes off Wayne. "Mr. Hollard was just leaving." "Actually," Ben said, his voice taking on a dangerous edge, "I think there's something Mr. Hollard should know before he goes." Wayne looked between them, sensing that some final blow was about to fall. "We're getting married," Ben announced, his words hitting Wayne like a physical assault. "Next month, in fact. It's going to be the wedding of the year. 500 guests, all the city's most influential people. Jenny's going to be the most beautiful bride anyone has ever seen." Wayne felt his knees go weak. "Married." "That's right," Jenny said, holding up her left hand to display a ring that Wayne had somehow missed before. The diamond was enormous, flawless, the kind of ring that spoke of love without limits and resources without end. "Ben proposed last week in the garden where we had our first real conversation about love. It was perfect, romantic, everything a proposal should be. 500 guests," Ben continued relentlessly. "The mayor will be there, the governor, senators, business leaders, celebrities. It's going to be covered by every major publication in the country. Jenny's dress is being designed by Valentino himself." Wayne stared at the ring, remembering the night Jenny had stood in his foyer holding a pregnancy test, hoping for some sign that he cared. He had given her nothing. Ben was giving her everything. "The honeymoon will be a month in Europe," Jenny added, her voice dreamy with happiness. "Paris, Rome, the Greek islands. Ben's yacht is being prepared as we speak." "And when we get back," Ben said, his arm tightening around Jenny, "we're going to start trying for another baby. Hope's been asking for a little brother or sister." The final blow landed with devastating precision. Not only had Wayne lost Jenny and Hope, but Ben would give them more children, expand their family, create a dynasty of love that Wayne would never be part of. "I hope you'll be very happy," Wayne managed to say, though the words felt like glass in his throat. "We will be," Jenny said with absolute certainty. "We already are." She looked at him one last time, and Wayne saw his future reflected in her eyes. Loneliness, regret, a lifetime of wondering what might have been. "Goodbye, Wayne," she said softly. "I hope you find what you're looking for someday, but you won't find it with us." As they walked away, Wayne heard Jenny laugh at something Ben whispered in her ear. The sound was pure joy, the laughter of a woman who was completely, utterly happy. It was a sound Wayne had never inspired, a happiness he had never given her. He stood alone in the ballroom, watching through the windows as the couple that should have been his climbed into a limousine and drove away to their perfect life. The awards ceremony continued around him, but Wayne saw none of it. All he could see was his future stretching out before him, empty, bitter, filled with nothing but the echoes of his own terrible choices. The queen was marrying her king, and the fool who had cast her aside was left with nothing but his foolish pride and the taste of ashes in his mouth. Wayne Hollard walked out of the hotel and into the rain, just as he had forced Jenny to do 2.5 years ago. But unlike Jenny, he had no Ben Norris waiting to save him. He had only himself to blame for the hell he had created. And somewhere across the city, in a penthouse filled with love and laughter, Jenny was planning the wedding that would make her happiness complete, while Wayne planned nothing but the slow destruction of everything he had left. Chapter 8. The Breakdown. The eviction notice on Wayne Hollard's kitchen table had become his most honest companion. Unlike the whiskey that lied about tomorrow, the legal document told only brutal truths about consequences and time running out. Final notice: vacate premises within 72 hours or face legal action. 72 hours. 3 days before he'd joined the ranks of the homeless, just as he'd forced Jenny to do years ago. The universe had a sense of irony that would have been amusing if it weren't so perfectly, devastatingly just. His phone buzzed with another ignored call from creditors, another demand he couldn't meet, another piece of the Hollard empire crumbling into dust. Everything was gone. The business liquidated, the mansion foreclosed, his possessions sold to buy him time that had expired anyway. While he'd been obsessing over Jenny's perfect life, his own had dissolved like sugar in rain. But it hadn't been enough. Nothing was ever enough anymore. Wayne's obsession with Jenny had consumed him so completely that he'd let everything else slip away. While he'd been stalking charity galas and planning desperate encounters, his creditors had been circling like vultures. While he'd been dreaming of somehow winning back the woman he'd thrown away, his real life had been dissolving around him. The irony was crushing. Jenny had risen from nothing to everything, while he had fallen from everything to nothing. She was about to marry the most eligible man in the city, while he was about to be thrown out on the street like the garbage he'd once called her. A soft knock at his apartment door interrupted his spiral into self-pity. Wayne stumbled to answer it, expecting another process server or debt collector. Instead, he found a young woman in expensive clothes holding an envelope. "Wayne Hollard?" she asked, though her tone suggested she already knew the answer. "Yeah, that's me. I'm Caroline Mitchell from Mitchell, Burke and Associates. I have something for you." Wayne accepted the envelope with trembling hands, his mind immediately jumping to the worst-case scenario. Another lawsuit, another debt, another nail in the coffin of his former life. But when he opened it, he found something that made his blood run cold. Wedding invitations, thick, expensive cardstock with elegant calligraphy that announced the upcoming marriage of Jennifer Davis and Benjamin Norris. "Ms. Norris wanted to make sure you received this personally," Caroline said with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "She thought you might want to know the date so you could make other plans." Wayne stared at the invitation, his hands shaking so badly he could barely read the words. The wedding was set for the following Saturday at the Cathedral of St. John, followed by a reception at the Grand Meridian Hotel, the same hotel where Ben had first rescued Jenny from Wayne's cruelty. "She also wanted me to give you this," Caroline continued, handing him a smaller envelope. Wayne's fingers fumbled with the seal, and inside he found a handwritten note in Jenny's familiar script. "Wayne, I thought you should know that I'm exactly where I belong. I hope someday you find where you belong too. Jenny." The words were kind, almost gentle, but they hit Wayne like sledgehammers. There was no anger in them, no bitterness, just a calm certainty that made his desperation seem even more pathetic. There's one more thing, Caroline said, producing a final document. Ms. Norris has asked me to present you with this restraining order. It prohibits you from coming within 500 feet of her, her family, her workplace, or any event she might attend. Violation will result in immediate arrest. Wayne stared at the legal document, the final door slamming shut on any possibility of contact with Jenny. She had cut him out of her life completely, legally, permanently. I understand, Wayne whispered. Caroline studied his face with something that might have been pity. Mr. Hollard, Ms. Norris also wanted me to tell you that if you seek help, real professional help for your problems, she'll consider having this order modified to allow you to attend public events again, but only if you prove you're no longer a threat to her peace of mind. After Caroline left, Wayne sat alone with the wedding invitation spread before him like a tarot card predicting his doom. The elegant script seemed to mock him, each word a reminder of what he'd lost and would never get back. Love Scene 4. The Sanctuary. Jenny's lawyer had warned her that restraining order violations often escalated before they stopped. She'd taken precautions, security escorts, varied schedules, panic buttons. But she hadn't expected Wayne to completely lose what remained of his sanity. The parking garage confrontation happened exactly as her security team had predicted it might. Wayne, drunk and desperate, had been waiting in the shadows when her car pulled in. But, unlike his fantasy of a dramatic romantic gesture, reality delivered only the pathetic spectacle of a broken man making threats he couldn't back up. "Jenny!" he shouted, stumbling toward her. "I know you're getting married. I know you think you love him, but you belong with me." Jenny's finger was already on her panic button, and she could hear the elevator descending with Ben and security. She felt no fear, only profound sadness for what Wayne had become. "Wayne, you violated the restraining order by being here," she said calmly. "The police are already on their way." "I don't care about the police." Wayne's voice cracked with desperation. "I don't care about anything except making you understand. We had something real." "No, Wayne," Jenny said firmly. "You had something real. I had an illusion." "No, you don't," Jenny said firmly, holding up a hand to stop his advance. "You love the idea of what you lost. You love your own regret, but you don't love me." "That's not true!" Wayne's voice cracked with desperation. "I know I made mistakes, but I can change. I can be the man you need me to be." "The man I need?" Jenny's laugh was soft but devastating. "Wayne, I already have the man I need. I have Ben. I have a partner who values me, respects me, cherishes me. I have a man who sees my worth and celebrates it instead of diminishing it." Wayne felt tears streaming down his face, though he couldn't remember when he'd started crying. "But I gave you everything first. I was there first." "You gave me nothing," Jenny corrected, her voice never rising above a conversational tone. "You took from me. You used me. You threw me away when I became inconvenient. Ben gave me everything: love, respect, purpose, a family." "I can give you those things too," Wayne begged. "No, you can't," Jenny said with absolute certainty, "because you don't know how. You don't know how to love without possessing, how to value without controlling, how to give without expecting payment in return." Wayne collapsed against a concrete pillar, his legs no longer able to support him. "I'm losing everything," he sobbed. "My business, my home, my life, it's all falling apart." For the first time since he'd appeared, Jenny's expression softened slightly. "I'm sorry that's happening to you, Wayne. I truly am. But it's not my responsibility to fix your life." "You're all I have left," Wayne whispered, the admission torn from his soul. "I was never yours to have," Jenny replied gently. "I was a person who loved you, who would have given you everything if you'd just been brave enough to love me back. But you weren't. And now it's too late." The sound of footsteps echoed through the garage, and Wayne looked up to see Ben Norris approaching with 2 security guards. His face was calm but implacable, the expression of a man who would do whatever was necessary to protect what he loved. "The police are on their way," Ben said quietly, "but I wanted to give you a chance to leave voluntarily." Wayne looked between Ben and Jenny, seeing the way Ben positioned himself protectively without being asked, the way Jenny relaxed slightly at his presence. They were a team, a unit, a partnership that Wayne had never been capable of offering. "She loves you," Wayne said to Ben, the words coming out like a confession. "I know," Ben replied simply, "and I love her. That's how it's supposed to work." "I could have had that," Wayne whispered, more to himself than to them. "Yes," Jenny said, surprising him. "You could have, if you'd been brave enough to try." Wayne pulled himself to his feet, swaying slightly as the alcohol and exhaustion threatened to overwhelm him. "I'm sorry," he said, looking directly at Jenny, "for everything, for hurting you, for wasting what we could have had, for making you afraid." Jenny nodded acknowledgement of his apology, but Wayne could see that it changed nothing. The damage was too deep, the time was too late, the chance was too far gone. "Goodbye, Wayne," she said softly. "I hope you find peace." As Wayne walked away, leaving behind the woman he'd loved and lost and the life he'd destroyed with his own hands, he heard Ben's voice behind him. "Are you all right?" Ben asked Jenny, his voice full of concern and tenderness. "I'm perfect," came Jenny's reply. "I'm exactly where I belong." Wayne climbed into his car and drove away, the wedding invitation still clutched in his hand. In 5 days, Jenny would marry Ben Norris and become Mrs. Benjamin Norris in every legal and spiritual sense. She would walk down the aisle in a designer gown, surrounded by everyone who mattered in their world, while Wayne would be, where? Homeless, probably. Alone, certainly. Living with the consequences of choices he could never undo and losses he could never recover. The breakdown was complete. Wayne Hollard had nothing left but his regrets and the bitter knowledge that he had no one to blame but himself. Chapter 9. The Ultimate Revenge. Rain on a wedding morning was supposed to bring luck, but as Jenny Norris-to-be listened to the gentle precipitation against her hotel suite windows, she knew the only luck she needed was already sleeping peacefully in the next room and would soon be waiting at the altar. "Good morning, future Mrs. Norris." Ben's voice carried the warmth of contentment and the anticipation of forever as his arms encircled her from behind. She melted into his embrace, marveling at how completely safe she felt here, how thoroughly loved. "Are you ready to make this official?" "I've been ready since the moment I realized that love isn't something you chase," Ben murmured against her ear. "It's something you recognize when it finds you." Through the windows, the Cathedral of St. John rose like a prayer made manifest in stone and stained glass. In hours, she would walk down that aisle toward the future she'd never dared dream possible, carrying the hopes of a woman who had learned that sometimes the worst thing that happens to you opens the door to the best thing that ever could. Through the suite's windows, Jenny could see the Cathedral of St. John across the square, its spires piercing the grey sky like prayers made manifest. In a few hours, she would walk down that aisle and officially become what she'd been in her heart for months. Ben's wife, Hope's mother, a woman who had risen from the ashes of her old life to claim a destiny she'd never dared imagine. Love Scene 5, The Garden Promise. But first, there was something Ben wanted to show her. "I have a surprise," he said, his eyes twinkling with mischief. "Get dressed. Something casual." 20 minutes later, Jenny found herself being led through the hotel's private garden, the same space where Ben had first told her he loved her. But this morning, it had been transformed into something magical. Every tree was draped with lights, every flower bed arranged with jasmine, her favorite flower, and in the center of it all stood a small gazebo decorated with white roses and flowing silk. "Ben, what is this?" Jenny asked, her breath catching in her throat. "This is where it all began," Ben said, leading her to the gazebo. "This is where I first realized that I wanted to spend my life loving you. So I thought this morning, before we make it official in front of 500 people, we should have a moment that's just ours." Inside the gazebo, Hope was waiting with Jenny's mother, who had flown in from Chicago for the wedding. The little girl was dressed in a miniature version of Jenny's wedding dress, her face glowing with excitement. "Mama!" Hope called out, running into Jenny's arms. "Daddy Ben has a surprise!" "What kind of surprise, baby?" Jenny asked, though her eyes were on Ben, who had dropped to one knee, despite the fact that they were already engaged. "I know I already proposed," Ben said, his voice thick with emotion. "But that was just for you. This time I want to ask both of you." He pulled out a small velvet box, and inside were 2 rings, Jenny's wedding band and a smaller matching ring that was clearly meant for Hope. "Hope Elizabeth Norris," Ben said solemnly, looking at the little girl who had become his daughter in every way that mattered. "Will you let me be your daddy forever and always?" Hope clapped her hands together with delight. "Yes! Yes! Yes!" Ben slipped the small ring onto her finger. A promise ring, Jenny realized, something Hope could wear as a symbol of their family bond. "And Jennifer Davis," Ben continued, his eyes meeting Jenny's, "will you marry me? Will you let me love you and Hope for the rest of our lives? Will you build a family with me, create a legacy with me, grow old with me?" "Yes," Jenny whispered, tears streaming down her face. 1,000 times yes. As Ben slipped the wedding band onto her finger beside her engagement ring, Jenny felt a profound sense of completion. This was her family. This was her home. This was the love she had always deserved but never dared hope for. Jenny's wedding planning had been 18 months in the making, not 1 month of rushed preparation. She and Ben had wanted everything perfect, had taken time to design a ceremony that honored both their love story and their commitment to building something lasting. The invitation to Wayne wasn't an invitation at all. It was a public notice, legally required when someone with a restraining order might accidentally encounter the protected party at a public event. Jenny's lawyer had insisted on the notification to prevent any legal complications. Caroline Mitchell's visit to Wayne's apartment was purely procedural. "Mr. Hollard, I'm required to inform you that Jennifer Davis and Benjamin Norris will be married on Saturday at the Cathedral of St. John. This is a public venue, but the restraining order remains in effect. You are prohibited from approaching within 500 feet of the cathedral or reception venue." Wayne stared at the legal notice, understanding that this wasn't an invitation, it was a warning. Jenny wasn't asking him to witness her happiness. She was making sure he couldn't claim ignorance if he violated the order. But the cruelest part wasn't the legal language. It was the small, handwritten note attached. "Wayne, I thought you should know that I found what I was looking for. I hope someday you find peace." "Are you sure, dear?" "I'm positive. Margaret, will you do me a favor? Will you make sure Wayne Hollard receives one final invitation?" Ben raised an eyebrow, but Jenny squeezed his hand reassuringly. "Jenny, what are you planning?" Margaret asked. "I'm planning to show him exactly what he lost, and exactly what I gained." 2 hours later, as Jenny stood in her bridal suite being transformed by a team of the city's most elite stylists, she felt a calm settle over her that had nothing to do with pre-wedding nerves and everything to do with certainty. The dress was a masterpiece. Valentino himself had designed it, a creation of ivory silk and French lace that made Jenny look like a fairy tale princess. But it wasn't the dress that transformed her. It was the confidence that radiated from within, the knowledge that she was exactly where she belonged. "You look like a queen," her mother said, tears streaming down her face. "I feel like one," Jenny replied, and meant it. The Cathedral of St. John was packed to capacity when Jenny arrived. Every seat was filled with the city's most influential people, politicians, business leaders, celebrities, philanthropists. It was exactly the kind of wedding Wayne had once mocked her for dreaming about, the kind of society event he'd told her she could never be part of. But as Jenny stood at the back of the cathedral, her arm linked through her mother's, she wasn't thinking about Wayne or revenge or justice. She was thinking about Ben, waiting for her at the altar with Hope beside him, both of them glowing with love and anticipation. The wedding march began, and Jenny started her walk down the aisle. With each step, she felt her old life falling away and her new life rising to meet her. The congregation rose to their feet, 500 people paying homage to a woman who had once been told she was worthless. Halfway down the aisle, Jenny caught sight of a figure in the back corner. Wayne Hollard, looking haggard and broken, his clothes clearly second-hand and his face gaunt with desperation. He was watching her with an expression of such profound loss that Jenny almost felt sorry for him. Almost. Because this moment wasn't about him. It wasn't about revenge or justice or proving a point. This moment was about love, real love, the kind that built rather than destroyed, that elevated rather than diminished, that celebrated rather than possessed. When Jenny reached the altar, Ben took her hands with a smile that could have powered the cathedral's lights. "You're so beautiful," he whispered, and Jenny knew he didn't just mean the dress or the makeup or the flowers in her hair. He meant her heart, her spirit, her essence. "Dearly beloved," the minister began, "we are gathered here today to witness the union of two souls who have found in each other not just love, but completion." As the ceremony proceeded, Jenny was aware of the watching crowd, aware of the cameras recording every moment for posterity, aware of Wayne's broken presence in the corner, but all of it faded into background noise compared to the man holding her hands and promising to love her forever. "Do you, Benjamin Michael Norris, take Jennifer to be your lawfully wedded wife?" "I do," Ben said, his voice strong and clear. "I absolutely do." "Do you, Jennifer Davis, take Benjamin to be your lawfully wedded husband?" "I do," Jenny replied, her voice carrying to every corner of the cathedral. "With all my heart, I do." As they exchanged rings and sealed their vows with a kiss, the congregation erupted in applause, 500 people celebrating a love story that had risen from the ashes of cruelty to become something beautiful and true. But the sweetest moment came when Hope, who had been standing patiently beside them throughout the ceremony, tugged on Jenny's dress. "Are we a real family now?" she asked in her clear, carrying voice. "We were always a real family, sweetheart," Jenny said, kneeling down to Hope's level. "But now it's official." As they walked back down the aisle as husband and wife, Jenny caught one last glimpse of Wayne. He was crying openly now, his face a mask of regret and loss. For a moment, their eyes met across the crowded cathedral. Jenny felt no anger, no bitterness, no desire for further revenge. Wayne Hollard had already received the ultimate punishment. He had to live with the knowledge of what he'd thrown away, while she got to live with the joy of what she'd found. The Queen had married her king, in front of everyone who mattered, in a ceremony that would be talked about for years to come. And the man who had once told her she was worthless got to watch it all from the shadows, knowing that his cruelty had led directly to her triumph. It was perfect. It was justice. It was love, conquering all. And it was only the beginning. Chapter 10. Love. Triumphant fairy tales, Jenny had discovered, were inadequate preparation for the reality of having every dream you'd never dared voice come true in spectacular, overwhelming abundance. The Grand Meridian Hotel's ballroom had been transformed into something that surpassed even her most ambitious fantasies. Crystal chandeliers casting rainbow light across marble floors where 500 of the city's most influential people celebrated love's triumph over cruelty. Every detail spoke of perfection achieved through unlimited resources and unlimited devotion. Orchids flown in from Thailand, champagne that cost more per bottle than most people's monthly salary, an orchestra whose music seemed to flow directly from heaven. But none of the material splendor could compare to the way Ben looked at her as they waltzed across the floor, like she was his miracle made manifest, his answered prayer dancing in his arms. "Happy doesn't seem like a big enough word," she whispered as he spun her with practiced grace. "Then what would you call this feeling?" Ben asked, his eyes holding the kind of warmth that could melt centuries of winter. "Coming home to a place I never knew existed," Jenny replied, and felt tears of pure joy threaten to spill down her cheeks. Around them, the 500 guests, senators, business moguls, celebrities, philanthropists, watched with genuine warmth. These weren't just society acquaintances fulfilling obligations. These were people who had come to genuinely love and respect Jenny for her intelligence, her compassion, and her dedication to making the world better. "Mrs. Norris," came a gentle voice, and Jenny turned to see Hope approaching in her flower girl dress, which had somehow remained pristine despite 3 hours of celebration. "Yes, sweetheart." Jenny knelt down to Hope's level, her designer gown pooling around her like spilled moonlight. "I have something for you," Hope said seriously, producing a small wrapped package. "Daddy Ben helped me pick it out." Jenny opened the gift to find a delicate gold bracelet with 3 charms, a heart engraved with Mama, a star engraved with Daddy, and a small flower engraved with Hope. "It's our family," Hope explained proudly, "so you'll always remember that we belong together." Jenny's eyes filled with tears as she fastened the bracelet around her wrist. "It's perfect, baby. Thank you." "And now I have a surprise for both of you," Ben said, his voice carrying a note of excitement that made Jenny look up sharply. "What kind of surprise?" she asked suspiciously, though she was smiling. Ben reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out an envelope. "I may have purchased something without consulting my wife first." "Benjamin Norris, what did you do?" "I bought us a house," Ben said, grinning at her shocked expression. "Not just any house, the Whitmore estate. 20 acres, 8 bedrooms, a tennis court, and a garden that will be perfect for Hope to grow up in." Jenny gasped. The Whitmore estate was legendary, a sprawling mansion that had belonged to the city's founding families for over a century. It had been on the market for 2 years, priced so high that only the wealthiest buyers could even consider it. "Ben, that's enormous. We don't need anything that big." "We do if we're planning to fill it with children," Ben said quietly, his eyes twinkling with mischief and love. "Children?" Jenny's voice came out as a whisper. "I was thinking maybe 4 or 5 more," Ben said, his arms encircling her waist. "Hope's been asking for siblings, and I have to admit, the idea of a house full of little Norrises sounds pretty perfect to me." Jenny felt her heart swell with so much love she could barely breathe. 5 children. "Only if you want them," Ben said quickly. I want everything with you, Jenny. I want the big family, the Sunday dinners, the chaos and noise and beautiful mess of a life filled with love." "Yes," Jenny said, standing on her tiptoes to kiss him. "Yes to all of it. Yes to the house, yes to the children, yes to the beautiful mess." As they kissed, the orchestra struck up a new song, and the guests applauded. The reception's security had been planned for months, coordinated with local police and private contractors. When Wayne appeared at the ballroom entrance, the guards immediately recognized him from the photos in their briefing files. The restraining order was clear: 500 feet minimum distance from Jenny or any event she attended. But instead of immediately arresting him, the head of security made a calculated decision. Wayne was clearly drunk, clearly broken, and clearly not a physical threat. A public arrest would create exactly the kind of scene that would overshadow Jenny's perfect day. Better to handle this quietly. "Mr. Hollard," the security chief said firmly, "you're in violation of a restraining order. You need to leave immediately, or we'll have to involve the police." "I just need to see her," Wayne slurred, swaying on his feet. "Just need to tell her I'm sorry." "Sir, you can tell her from outside the building, but you cannot enter this venue." What happened next was captured by every society photographer in the room. Not Wayne forcing his way inside, but Wayne collapsing to his knees outside the ballroom's glass doors, visible to everyone inside but unable to enter. It was a perfect metaphor for his entire relationship with Jenny. Always on the outside, looking in at the happiness he'd thrown away. Wayne stumbled toward them, his eyes red-rimmed with tears and what looked like days of drinking. When he reached them, he fell to his knees right there on the ballroom floor in front of everyone. "Jenny," he sobbed, his voice breaking, "please. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry." "Wayne," Jenny said quietly, "you shouldn't be here." "I know," he cried, "but I had to. I had to tell you. I lost everything, my business, my house, my money. It's all gone. I have nothing left." "I'm sorry to hear that," Jenny said, and surprisingly, she meant it. "But I don't understand what that has to do with me." "You have to help me," Wayne begged, reaching for her dress. "You have connections now, influence. You could save me. You could—" "No," Jenny said firmly, stepping back from his grasping hands. "I couldn't. And I wouldn't." Wayne looked up at her with desperate, pleading eyes. "But I love you. I've always loved you." "No, Wayne," Jenny said, her voice carrying clearly across the silent ballroom. "You loved the idea of owning me. You loved having power over me, but you never loved me. Because love doesn't destroy, it builds. Love doesn't diminish, it elevates. Love doesn't throw away, it treasures." She gestured to Ben, who stood beside her with quiet strength. "This man loves me. He's shown me what real love looks like. Patient, kind, supportive, encouraging. He's never tried to make me smaller so he could feel bigger. He's helped me become the best version of myself." Wayne's face crumpled as he realized the truth of her words. "But I could learn," he whispered. "I could change." "Maybe you could," Jenny agreed, "but not with me. That chance is gone, Wayne. You threw it away the night you threw me out in the rain." She knelt down to his level, her voice gentle but implacable. "Wayne, I want you to look around this room. Really look." Wayne's tear-filled eyes swept the ballroom, taking in the elegant decorations, the distinguished guests, the obvious wealth and sophistication of the celebration. "Every person in this room respects me," Jenny continued. "They value my opinion. They seek my advice. They celebrate my happiness. I have built a life that matters, a love that enriches, a family that cherishes me. I have everything you told me I could never have." "I know," Wayne sobbed. "I see it. I see what I lost." "Good," Jenny said, standing up. "I want you to remember this moment, Wayne. I want you to remember that when you had the chance to love me, you chose cruelty instead. When you could have built a family with me, you chose pride instead. When you could have had everything you see here tonight, you chose nothing." Wayne remained on his knees, his shoulders shaking with sobs. "What am I supposed to do now?" "You're supposed to live with the consequences of your choices," Jenny said, her voice neither cruel nor kind, simply honest. "Just like I had to live with the consequences of yours. The difference is my consequences led me to happiness. Yours will lead you wherever you decide to take them." She gestured to the security guards. "Please escort Mr. Hollard out, and make sure he understands that this is the last time he'll be welcome anywhere I am." As the guards helped Wayne to his feet, he looked at Jenny one last time. "I would have married you," he said desperately. "If I could do it over, I would have married you." Jenny smiled sadly. "No, Wayne. You would have married me to possess me, to control me, to keep me small and grateful. Ben married me to celebrate me, to partnership with me, to help me become everything I was meant to be. That's the difference between you and him. And that's why I'm here with him, and you're leaving alone." As Wayne was escorted out, the ballroom remained silent for a moment. Then, slowly, the applause began. It started with Margaret Whitmore, then spread to the other guests, until the entire room was giving Jenny a standing ovation. Not for humiliating Wayne, though many of them had heard whispers about her past and could guess what had just transpired, but for the grace and dignity with which she had handled an impossible situation. "Ladies and gentlemen," Ben said, his voice carrying over the applause, "I give you my wife, the strongest, most remarkable woman I have ever known." The applause grew louder, and Jenny felt tears streaming down her face. But these weren't tears of sadness or anger. They were tears of pure, overwhelming joy. "Thank you," she whispered to Ben as the crowd began to settle back into celebration. "For what?" "For showing me what I was worth, for never trying to make me smaller, for loving me big enough to become everything I was meant to be." Ben cupped her face in his hands, his thumbs brushing away her tears. "Jenny, you didn't become remarkable because I loved you. I fell in love with you because you were already remarkable. I just helped you see it." As the evening wore on, the reception continued with even more joy and celebration than before. The confrontation with Wayne had somehow cleared the air, removing the last shadow from Jenny's perfect day. She danced with Ben, with Hope, with her new father-in-law, with dozens of friends and colleagues who had become her chosen family. Late in the evening, as the party was winding down, Jenny stepped onto the hotel's terrace for a moment of quiet reflection. The city spread out below her, twinkling with lights that looked like earthbound stars. "No regrets?" Ben asked, joining her at the railing. "About what?" "About Wayne. About letting him see what he lost. Some people might say you were too kind to him." Jenny considered this. "I wasn't being kind to him, Ben. I was being true to myself. The woman you fell in love with doesn't humiliate people, even people who hurt her. She rises above them." "And the woman I fell in love with," Ben said, pulling her into his arms, "is going to make an incredible mother to all those children we're going to have." "All 5 of them?" Jenny laughed. "Well, maybe we'll start with one more and see how it goes." As they kissed under the starlit sky, Jenny felt a profound sense of completion. Somewhere in the city, Wayne Hollard was probably drinking himself into oblivion, consumed by regret and self-pity, but she felt no satisfaction in his downfall, no triumph in his suffering. His pain couldn't add to her joy. Her joy was complete without it. "Mrs. Norris?" Hope's voice came from the terrace doorway, where she stood holding the hand of her new grandmother. "Yes, sweetheart. Is it time to go home now?" Jenny looked at Ben, at Hope, at the woman who had become her mother-in-law and friend. Home. Yes, it was time to go home. Not to the penthouse where they'd been living, but to their real home. To the life they were going to build together, filled with children and laughter and the kind of love that lasted forever. "Yes, baby," Jenny said, taking Hope's free hand while Ben took the other. "It's time to go home." As they walked back into the ballroom to say their final goodbyes, Jenny caught her reflection in one of the mirrors that lined the walls. The woman looking back at her was radiant, confident, beloved. She bore no resemblance to the broken, desperate girl who had once begged Wayne Hollard for scraps of affection. That girl was gone, transformed by love into something stronger, something better, something worthy of the happiness she'd found. Jenny Norris, wife, mother, philanthropist, queen of her own destiny, smiled at her reflection and walked toward her future, leaving the past buried beneath the weight of her own success. The revenge was complete, but it wasn't the bitter, destructive revenge of enemies. It was the sweetest revenge of all, a life so full of love and joy that the man who had rejected it could only watch from the outside, knowing he had thrown away paradise for the sake of his own pride. Jenny had won. Not by destroying Wayne, but by building something beautiful without him. Love had triumphed, and in the end, that was the only victory that mattered. The end. 3 years later, Jenny and Ben welcomed their second child, a son they named Michael. Wayne Hollard was never seen at another society event, though rumors persisted that he had left the city entirely, unable to bear witnessing the happiness he had forfeited. Hope grew up knowing only love, security, and the unshakable knowledge that she was exactly where she belonged. And every night, as Ben tucked their children into bed in their magnificent estate, Jenny whispered a prayer of gratitude for the cruelty that had led her to kindness, the rejection that had led her to acceptance, and the man who had thrown her away so that she could find her way to the man who would never let her go.